first off, we need to address something. It's very obvious. You might be saying, Josh, why do you look like you've changed races? The reason why is because today was Juneteenth and I decided to go to the lake because I had a little bit of time with some family, and this is what happened. So I'm still white. I just look like an Oompa Loompa from Willy Wonka. Please bear with me, and hopefully it will turn into a tan by the next time I have a podcast. Now, for those of you who didn't hear, this week an Obama-era judge, essentially they ruled that St. George is a city in southern Utah. St. George was basically forced to have a drag parade, which city officials had tried to shut down. The reason why was because this was an all-age drag parade. And so a Obama-era judge, a district judge, ruled that this was unconstitutional, that the First Amendment protected these drag queens from sexualizing children. And this has obviously sparked a lot of backlash. According to the St. George newspaper, their local newspaper, public spaces are public spaces, is what the district judge said. And they're not private spaces. He basically went on to say public spaces are not majority spaces. The First Amendment of the United States Constitution ensures that all citizens, popular or not, majority or minority, conventional or unconventional, have access to public spaces for public expression. Now, what he said there is true, that you cannot discriminate on gender or ethnicity or sexual orientation or any way that you identify when you're in a public space. And where the drag queens were wanting to have the parade is a public space. So the judge is right about this. However, the First Amendment has a lot of, the way it's interpreted in the United States is very different when it comes to children. And so, like, I don't understand how this district judge even got around this, but like it's very intuitive for us to think about how the First Amendment applies differently with children. For instance, the First Amendment, when it comes to broadcasting, is interpreted very differently. There's only so many things that you can have on from, say, 10 in the morning to 7 p.m. at night, because it's reasonable that a child might be watching. So that's why you have adult content after 10 p.m. And it is illegal to have, rated X or even certain channels to have rated R content during certain hours of the day, because the First Amendment has been interpreted differently depending on children. Another example of this is, in order to access pornography, you must be 18 years old. And it is illegal, I believe, in most states, if not the whole United States, to not have some sort of a disclaimer in adult content websites, because even though pornography is protected under the First Amendment as of now, it is not protected for children. And the reason why this is because this is sexualizing children, which is something that the United States up until now has decided they don't want to do. And this is now changing, because basically in the name of gender ideology, which really it's really scary. Like, gender ideology kind of changes everything in the United States, especially the way that judges are interpreting the First Amendment. Like, at no other time have we been okay with sexualizing children and saying that that's somehow free speech. It's always been that children are protected and that there are certain lines that you just don't cross. And so to have an all ages drag queen parade is really interesting. It's like, just to put it into perspective and to kind of change the wording of it, it's essentially illegal for you to take away the right for someone to sexualize children. And before you say, like, oh, but people aren't forced to go to this drag queen parade, it's important to recognize that any sexualizing kids in any way is illegal. It's completely illegal for parents, or even parents, like the guardian of the child, to take sexually explicit pictures of kids. It is illegal for people to show kids pornography. It doesn't matter if they're adult or not. And the reason why this is because it's sexualizing the children, which is not something that is appropriate. And that's how the law has been interpreted up until now. But what's scary is that people are saying, well, parents should have the right to take their children and bring them to these all-age drag parades. And it doesn't take a lot of research just to go online and look up these parades and kind of see what they do at them. In my experience, I've seen that some of the parades are watered down a little bit, but for the most part, it's very sexual. There's usually poles. There's pole dancing. There are they're not modest clothing. And there's a lot of things said there that really just, like, there's really just no reason for kids to be there and to be educated on drag. So this is really concerning. And kudos to the St. George City Council that tried to get, I mean, they did everything they could. The Obama era, the reason why I'm saying Obama era is because this judge was put in by Obama. But this judge, he's the one that did it, and he did it, against what I believe is the precedent for the First Amendment surrounding children and free speech. But the city council did what they could in order to prevent this. And so I'm hoping they'll continue to take actions to kind of boycott the event in other legal ways so that they, don't get a lot of traction and aren't having a lot of people there. Like, I don't really care if they have like a private parade for adults. Like, it's not cool to me, but I understand that that's protected under the First Amendment. But if there's any chance that a child is going to see this, we just can't have it. And we should always elect officials that just take a hard stance against it. And it seems to be the case in St. George. Unfortunately, the judge just did something wrong. With that, I want to talk about Ground News really quick. If you didn't hear, Ground News is essentially a place where you can get all your news in one place, as well as get their biases, as well as their business dealings. That's one of my favorite things about Ground News, is it makes it so that you can see who owns certain news outlets, deduce for yourself the certain biases, as well as the motivations that they might have for posting certain stories. At Ground News, you can get a subscription to see all the news as well as their biases. They kind of give a little bit of a score from moderate to left to conservative. I found it to be quite accurate, and I use it for a lot of the things that I post on this channel just to make sure that I am understanding their biases. I suggest everyone to do it so that they can craft their own worldview. Down in the description below, if you use my link, you will get 15% off a subscription to Ground News. Some of their subscriptions run as low as $1, so it is so worth the money in order for you to be able to get objective journalism so that you're able to kind of craft that worldview and see the biases of the legacy media as well as alternate news sources. In addition to kind of the gross aspect of what literally happened, what I want to talk about, and this is kind of the theme for this episode, how the media have reacted to this story. So I live in Utah, so I've heard about this a little bit more than probably most people, but this has still been on a national scale. I've seen it in national news. I just want to read for everyone a few of the headlines. It just gives you an idea of two things, really. It tells you, one, how much the media is in an echo chamber, and second, how biased they are. And there's a few rare exceptions, and I'll read them too. If I just search on Google, district judge makes Utah hold drag parade, okay? Now that's my bias. Like, that's how I would say it. Like, the district judge is making Utah do it. Okay, so that's a conservative bias that I just searched. What I get are the following things. So from WPTZ, the headline is, a Utah city violated the First Amendment in denying a drag parade. Go.com, a Utah city violated the First Amendment in denying a drag parade. Same headline. Yahoo, a Utah city violated the First Amendment by denying a drag parade. Fox 13, judge sides with organizers in lawsuit, orders St. George to hold drag parade. That is an actual headline. That one makes sense. KJZZ, St. George violated the First Amendment in denying a drag parade. So if you look up like the first five, if you just search that, even with a conservative bias, you get five. And out of the five, four of the five have the exact same headline. And they all talk about how Utah violated the First Amendment and are evil and taking the rights of LGBTQ individuals. And I just think that's really interesting. To be like, no one's surprised at this point that the media are very liberal. They're very biased. But what's so surprising is how blatant it's become. Like, they don't even care anymore. They're not trying to hide it. Literally all those people, I've never even heard of some of those websites, by the way. Like there are some more mainstream media like Yahoo. Some of those I've never heard of. Same headline. Did the exact same headline. There's like a really creepy video. I'm going to do a video on this in a second, but there's a really creepy video that someone kind of compilated. This was during COVID, I think, of just all the legacy media, and they're like saying the exact same things verbatim. And it goes from like one person saying it to 4 to 8 until it's like literally hundreds of channels. And it's crazy because they're saying verbatim the same things. And so you start to wonder who is feeding them these lines and what is the echo chamber that they're living in, and is this something that is this something that they care about? Are we doing enough to fight against it? Another thing that I'm sure everyone has heard in the news recently, this is kind of old news, but I think it goes really well with this, especially with the LGBTQ agenda, is with what's happening with Target. And it's still happening. And this is another one that happened in Utah. So opposite side of Utah. So St. George's in the south, going up to Ogden in the north. There was this huge news that a Target store was being targeted. See what I did there? Targeted for bomb threats. Okay, so they had some bomb threats. Now, let me just read the headlines for you. And I want everyone, if you haven't heard this story, I want you just to kind of deduce what happened just off this headline, because that's what the headline is there for, after all, right? You hear a headline and it's there to kind of hook you in so you'll read the article, but it's also there so you kind of know what happened in a sentence or two. Let me read just a few. I just searched Target bomb threats. So maybe I've heard about it. I'm looking it up to find out about it. The Washington Post. Target stores receive bomb threats as Pride backlash persists. Okay. So I read that and I think to myself, okay, cool. We know that there's a backlash happening with Target. We know that conservatives are not very happy. So a conservative must have gone out and, because it says like as Pride backlash persists, they must have, threatened that Target. And if you thought that, you would be a logical human being. But in fact, that didn't happen. What happened was that Target saw that they were being boycotted. They realized, especially in Utah, that they have a very conservative consumer base. And so they decided to retract their Pride merch. And what happened? An LGBTQ activist group started making bomb threats. Now, I don't care who makes bomb threats, if it's on the left or the right. That's wrong. That's evil. That's scary. That's terrorism. But the way the Washington Post, and it's not just them, it was many more. The way they make it sound in their headline is that a conservative is threatening the Target store, when in reality it is LGBTQ individuals, which is pretty astounding too. And like the story on its face is very astounding. The fact that there would be a group so upset about someone not selling merch that has to do with them that they would make a bomb threat, that just gives you like a little clue into how like the atmosphere in our country right now. But then you have the media that are purposefully misleading, and the Washington Post, no less. Like, this is not a small media outlet. This is one of the top news organizations in the world. And they're saying something that makes you believe the opposite is true. Super scary stuff. The reason why I bring this up is because, and we're going to talk about this in just a second, this leads us to alternate news sources. YouTube, Rumble, Instagram, Twitter, especially Twitter, podcasts. These things are starting to really heat up as the main way people find truth. And like I've always said, it's not because we as content creators or as political commentators are journalists, but it's because we're columnists and we're simply just trying to disseminate. We're just giving out information as much as we can. It is on you then to craft what you feel is the truth. And I hate to say that because there is only one truth. But at the end of the day, we cannot trust certain news organizations to do that. And so we must go out, find it ourselves, and piece it together. And it's no wonder that these alternate news sources are getting so much popularity when you see such dirty journalism like the Washington Post, as well as all the other legacy news.